Well, happy post-Oscars morning to one and all. We're going to call this episode 114.5, the Oscars follow-up, given that yesterday was the Oscars episode. If you're joining me for this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, or enjoying the content, please click like, subscribe, comment, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch up with this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same rule applies. Click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. So you'll see again that I am in the car. I don't have that long of a drive, but I really wanted to get this out while the thoughts and all the stories are fresh in mind. So the Oscars went pretty much according to what we like to say. Anyone who ever did sports betting, I haven't done much of it, but we always talk about the chalk. The chalk means what is the most likely winner. So if for example, Michael Jordan's Bulls in 1996 played in the finals against pretty much anyone, the chalk would say that they would win. The chalk meaning they're clear odds-on favorites to win. And Oppenheimer was odds-on favorite in most of the categories in which it ended up winning, from Best Actor, Murphy, Supporting Actor, RDJ, and Christopher Nolan, who has been doing so much incredible work, even in movies of his that I don't really like. I wasn't quite sure exactly what was going on for certain stretches of Dunkirk. Like, he makes movies like Kubrick, where the plot doesn't always advance from A to B to C, and you have to pay attention. He is not a short append. It's amazing that he's had as much success as he's had and is as widely revered in the era where so many people are watching movies while on their phone. And he is not a filmmaker whose movies are designed so that you could watch on your phone, meaning, no, not that you could watch on your phone, that you could be fucking around on your phone while watching his movies, would be a better way to put it. So I am happy. I was pulling for Paul Giamatti to win Best Actor, as I mentioned yesterday, just for purely selfish reasons. I loved his performance in The Holdovers. What he did there was extraordinary, but I didn't really expect that he was going to win. Robert Downey Jr. is, if you want to use the word, controversial. He was a Nepo baby. Fine. His father was revered in Hollywood, Robert Downey Sr., not surprisingly. But Downey Jr. is an enormous talent and showed it right from the jump. I mean, you could go back in time and you could watch the Rodney Dangerfield movie, speaking of Back to School, which is another in a long list of movies that Gen Xers, it was a Gen X standard. HBO and Cinemax showed it. Well, they couldn't show it during the day because it's rated R. But HBO and Cinemax showed it over and over. And I must have watched that film 20 times. Sam Kinison, the late great stand-up comic, one of Rodney's old buddies. Well, not even that old. He appeared on Rodney's comedy special and fucking killed it. Sam Kinison, for those who don't know the name offhand, if you've seen the movie Back to School, he plays Professor Turgidson, the guy who goes berserk in class. Rodney has him in class. He was famous for the scream. Sam Kinison, oh, oh, oh! That was basically his shtick. He would seem fine and then would go berserk. Robert Downey Jr., if you don't know anything about his career, if you just took somebody and airdropped them to that movie, you would think that he was, at that particular time, a bigger star than he was. He was just getting going. He plays the main character's roommate. The main character, the actor Keith Gordon, not a bad actor, but he ended up becoming a fine filmmaker, even more so than an actor. But Downey Jr. in that film is fantastic. Every scene he's in is funny because he's just hilarious. His comic timing is impeccable. His facial expressions, amazing. And he did a lot of great work, what I think is great work, early in his career. And I guess he always, and I don't mean this, I don't want to seem ignorant saying it this way, because I know people who struggle with substance abuse, but he presumably was struggling in his personal life and struggling with his demons without knowing him and without reading an interview where he went into, maybe detail about well, this year this happened. I'm just saying from a broad perspective and an understanding of addiction and recovery and all of these things. And he made a movie in 1987, adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's novel Less Than Zero, which is set in the same kind of universe as American Psycho. That the characters, although we don't know anybody, it's more or less the same. It's the same universe. And Less Than Zero was, like American Psycho, was a huge best-selling, a runaway bestseller book for Bret Easton Ellis. And the movie is very, very strong, but Robert Downey Jr.'s performance is exemplary, because some of the other, like the younger actors, Andrew McCarthy and Jamie Gertz, they're talented, but he's just on another level. He is just a next level talent. And you see it in that movie as he's playing a character, and this has been discussed from a historical perspective. He's playing a character that isn't that much different than how he probably was or had been, if not at that time, but later when he, he kept getting threatened with jail time. He just couldn't stay out of trouble. And in that movie, if you go back and watch that, it's a very powerful film. And you wonder why he didn't get more acclaim for that role. Now, there were plenty of critics, and you could go back in time. For example, Roger Ebert, who I adore, the late great film critic, the Pulitzer Prize winner, who was a big fan of that movie. I believe he had read the book and he felt it was a good adaptation. But there were critics of the day that said Downey Jr. should absolutely get a Best Actor nomination. He makes you feel like he's an addict, and not knowing exactly that was basically true. But the performance there is top level, and at least until this, and it's different, although he would have been considered a supporting character in that movie. But I always had told people that's what I think is the best film acting that Robert Downey Jr. ever did, because he goes through almost the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of, stages of grief. His character experiences all of them within the context of a movie, and his character he's not really grieving or in mourning. He might be grieving or mourning for the loss of his identity and how he just wants to be able to do drugs and not have the repercussions, or at least that's how it comes across at certain points of the movie. It plays the line between addiction and recovery and the really kind of harrowing stuff that can happen, whether it's in the 1980s or today. If anything, it's even worse now, because everyone has such easy access to everyone and everything. I know people, not passing any judgment, who are might be smoking, and they have 5 or 6 different plugs they can go to. Well, I want the plant. Well, all we have is the edible. Okay, I'll take that. You might have only had one choice, one guy that you could go to, and man. But that being said, he was always. Never took a performance off, Robert Downey Jr., even when he was in the depths of it, and he was, every day had to have been horrendous. He still showed up and did good work. The movie Chaplin, where, I guess you could make the argument he could have won, but if I dare speak out against Al Pacino, who I fucking love. Al Pacino is the man. But Al Pacino won a Best Actor Oscar for Scent of a Woman, where Robert Downey Jr. in Chaplin and Denzel in Malcolm X, I believe, gave better performances in their respective films. It's not a knock on Pacino. That was looked upon even at the time that they got to give Pacino, this is ridiculous that he hasn't won one. And he was up, I would argue his performance in a supporting role the same year, Glenn Ross, he's better in that movie than he is in Scent of a Woman. He didn't win for that. So what are you going to do? Shit happens. That was Gene Hackman's year for Unforgiven as far as supporting actor. But people knew that Downey Jr. was not going to win for Chaplin. And it had to have hurt, because he really puts his heart and soul into that movie, into that role. And nobody could be Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, a top 5 most important figure in the history of cinema, at least over here. And many would argue, no, you don't need to qualify and say United States. You could just say in the history of cinema. It's not easy to inhabit somebody at that level, somebody who literally changed the movie business, who changed performance and style, and he was a fine filmmaker in his own right, Charlie Chaplin. That really had to have hurt that he didn't win. And we saw he had a lot of issues throughout the 90s, and still solid, kind of under the radar film that I really like called The Gingerbread Man with Kenneth Branagh and Robert Duvall. He does excellent work. He plays a character, kind of a very lower level version of who he played in the real life story Zodiac, where he's just phenomenal. But he's someone that he's easy to root for. In my opinion, he's always been easy to root for, because there are people, and we see it at the Oscars, and there's always controversy where some people just, they were putting on an act, they're full of shit, or dare I say they're playing to the crowd or saying what they think people want to hear rather than what they really feel. My perception of Robert Downey Jr. now in the last 2 decades, since he was able to get his recovery together, and hopefully for the final time, my perception is that he is, when he comes across as grateful, he really is. He's not putting on an act. He is not trying to say things because this is what Hollywood wants to hear, or this is what the people who watch my films and people who count themselves as fans, this is what they want me to say, and I'm going to say it. I believe in him. I believe that at this point in his life, he is exactly what we think, and kind of jokes around with it on his social media, where he doesn't really identify himself by name. He always just says, "You know who I am." But he still has a sense of humor about himself. And even last year, before I started the podcast, I was going nuts on Instagram story because there was an idea, and it might still be happening, that Robert Downey Jr. was going to play the James Stewart role in a remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. Let me tell you something. There are sacred cows. They remade Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Don't touch Vertigo. Don't do it. Don't do it. You know, in the words of Mike Barnes in Karate Kid 3, don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do that. But even the way that he was, because he knew he was going to get asked the questions, and he said something like, "Oh, we're going to do way better. It's going to be easy." I don't know that he really was serious. Well, certainly he was joking around when he said, "Oh yeah, we'll be able to top the Hitchcock film, no problem." But he just comes across as someone who understands, yes, he was born into an unusual situation in that his father was in the movie business and was very well respected. Hey, Gwyneth Paltrow's dad, Bruce, was beloved in the movie business. Everybody adored Bruce Paltrow. Laura Dern, showbiz parents, Bruce Dern and Diane Ladd. There's nothing, at least for me, there's nothing wrong with being given the opportunities. You're still going to have to show up and do the work and get it done. Lawrence Kasdan's son, Jake, yeah, okay, he got into business because his father, Jake Kasdan is fucking brilliant. So, you know, we joke about, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but yeah, sometimes the apple really doesn't fall far from the tree, and sometimes the offspring outdoes the parents. It's not just the opportunity or the doors being open, it's the fact that there's a lot of fucking talent, and talent can run in the family. In the same way, Ken Griffey Jr., right? Top 10 great baseball players. He was a better player than his old man. And when they used to say, well, he grew up around it. No, yes, he grew up around it, but Griffey Jr. was an unbelievably talented guy. So, Downey Jr. got some of his father's eye for performance, even though his dad was not necessarily an actor. He was a filmmaker. But Downey Jr., just from the actorly perspective, he knows what works and what doesn't. And he's easy to root for, as I've said, and I'm happy he won. And Christopher Nolan, a guy who I don't love, as I said, every one of his films, but he is a master. He is a present-day master. He is the closest to Kubrick, more so even than Spielberg, just in terms of the shot construction, and that he is okay with not having the plots proceed in a linear fashion. The other thing I adore about Christopher Nolan is the guy's IQ is probably 180. but he speaks like a normal person. In interviews, he's very charming in interviews. He comes across like a college professor. I saw him getting interviewed all over when Oppenheimer was coming out, and the early buzz was, this is tremendous, and here he is. He never comes across as if he's talking down to the audience. Now, he could go on, a podcast by someone like me, and he could even pin my ears back discussing rack focusing and how he achieved certain crane shots and the fact that he used such and such a filter. And I actually used a 1960s Panaflex camera. He could do all of that, and I wouldn't know what he was talking about half the time, even though I studied that stuff. But when he's giving regular interviews, just talking about the movie, he knows how to break things down, not dumb down. He doesn't dumb it down, but he knows how to break things down so that the average film fan can understand what he's saying and where he's coming from. And not everyone can do that, because Martin Scorsese, speaking a million miles a minute, if you ask him a technical question, he's going to give you a technical answer. He's going to spit it out really fast. And I've listened to interviews with Scorsese where the average person will say, what the hell is he talking about? When he was doing interviews, you could look this up, for The Age of Innocence, a million years ago. There's a movie that should have gotten more acclaim for Scorsese, but that's beside the point. But Scorsese was saying things about frame speed and frame rate and changing lenses and different tricks that he was doing with the camera, where the average person, what the fuck? What universe is this guy from? I didn't even know that this was possible. He's just saying stuff that's, well, yeah, because when you're at that level of the business, you're doing things that the average film fan, they don't even have any conception of, let alone do they know about. So I'm happy that Divine Joy Randolph won for supporting actress for The Holdovers. I guess I don't want to say it was a courtesy Oscar. That's not right. But I just mean to say that movie was so incredible for me. I'm glad that she won. I'm glad that one of the major awards it was nominated for, because it was up for picture and director, and Paul Giamatti, as I said, and Dominic Sessa, who plays the main character other than Paul Giamatti. So the buzz was that she was going to win because she had pretty much won the same percentage of the major awards before the Oscars as Murphy had won for Oppenheimer. So I'm glad that she won. Alexander Payne's stupendous achievement was rewarded in some way, and she's so incredible. Like, this is not, oh, they just gave it to, no, you watch that movie and you tell me that woman in that role does not feel like a real life person, even though it is a fictional story. She comes across like a woman who has lived every minute of her life. It really is a revelatory performance. As you know, I don't need to make the argument, Robert Downey Jr. in Oppenheimer, that he makes you feel like this is not Iron Man. This is not, the kind of flashy kid that RDJ was and now the mature. No, he becomes this character. This is him. And that's really the best we can say for performance. And we're always going to have favorites and people we want to win who don't win and all of that. But my perception today, and Emma Stone winning for Best Actress, a lot of people were hoping that she would. She's very popular and super talented. But there is a sense, my perception of just, going on social media and seeing what some people whose opinion I greatly respect and who've seen all of the movies. It's a big difference if you have 10 films nominated for Best Picture and you've seen all 10. You can really give your opinion there, as opposed to, well, I've seen 3 and I thought this one got left out. It's completely different. But the perception this morning is more so than any Oscars that I can recall, the sense that the Academy, just in terms of the choices, the Academy got it right. That the overwhelming number of wins, even some that were surprises, I'm not getting as much, oh, this was terrible, this movie should have won, or that movie should have won, or this performance was more deserving. There's always going to be some of that. But the sense is that they got it right. As much as it's possible in a almost purely subjective enterprise to get who's better than who, what's better than what, and why, in order to get that right is really difficult. And that is my perception this morning, reading so many comments and so many people on social media, and just a general sense of what do we think of the Oscars last night? What do we think of who won which award? It seems that the Motion Picture Academy, this was a good year for them. And it was a great year. 2023 was a fantastic year for movies. But a good job. Well done. And yeah, those are my thoughts on last night's Oscars. And this has been episode 114.5, the Oscars, post 2024 Oscars. And if you caught this on the YouTube channel, enjoyed it, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. Or if you've caught up with this episode 114.5 on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same rule applies. Click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back in the studio later today, possibly tonight, for episode number 115. Till then, have a great day.